People assume the women who sweep museums are invisible. I suppose that is the idea. You move through the galleries at hours no one visits, you disturb nothing, and by morning the floors are clean, and no one wonders how. For 19 years, I was that kind of invisible. Marta Vale, sub-level custodian, South Wing, third shift. My badge said it plainly. I had long since stopped reading my badge. The lower hall sat at the end of a corridor that the public never reached. The museum had sealed it 9 years into my time there, a decision made quietly, after 3 separate assessment teams had come down, spent weeks cataloging the gallery's single occupant, and left without a final report. I know because I read the notice posted to the service door. I know because I was the one who kept the floor clean during each of those assessments, and I watched those scholars the way you watch weather, steadily, without expecting to be included. The occupant was a statue. That is what the intake record called it. Carved from pale gray stone, a stone no materials analyst had successfully classified. It stood 8 feet tall at the near end of the gallery, robed in carved fabric that caught the overhead light differently depending on where you stood. One hand was raised, palm outward at shoulder height, as if it had been in the middle of saying stop, when whatever froze it had done its work. The face was still. The eyes, deep set, without pupils, smooth, looked at nothing. The scholars could not date it. The stone contained no traceable isotopes. The carving technique matched no school, no period, no region of Earth. What they could say, after all those weeks of instruments and argument, was that the statue had never been worked by any tool they could identify, and that the robes, if you looked closely enough, were not carved into the stone, but seemed to emerge from it, as if the fabric and the stone were the same material in 2 different states. I read that in the second team's internal summary, which someone had left folded beneath a chair, and which I found when I swept under it. I read it twice. Then I put it on the assessment desk and went back to my mob. 19 years is a long time to spend with something that does not move. I learned the hall the way you learn the habits of someone you live with. I knew where the overhead light threw shadows across the raised palm. I knew which direction you had to approach from to catch the carved glyphs along the hem of the robe. Thin, precise lines that looked like language but had defeated everyone who had tried to read them. I knew that if you stood directly in front of the statue and looked up into its face for long enough, you stopped feeling like you were in a basement and started feeling like you were somewhere much older and much larger. I never told anyone that last part. It did not seem like useful information. The night it happened, I had come in later than usual. A water pipe on the building's east side had failed during the afternoon, and the cleanup on the upper floors had run long. By the time I reached the sub-level corridor it was past 2 in the morning, and the building above me was entirely empty. I did not mind. I had always preferred the hall at that hour. There was a quality to the silence down there that I had never found anywhere else. Thick, unbroken, like the silence inside a held breath. I pushed through the service door and ran the main lights. The hall looked as it always had, stone floor. High ceiling with the 2 pendant fixtures, both burning steadily, the statue at the near end, palm raised, eyes on nothing. I started at the far wall, the way I always did, working back toward the entrance. I was perhaps 10 minutes in, moving slowly, when I noticed the temperature. The hall ran cool. It always ran cool. The facilities team had never been able to explain the 3-degree drop that occurred naturally below the sub-level corridor, and eventually they had stopped trying and simply noted it in the building's environmental log. I had worn a cardigan down here every winter for 19 years. The air was warm. Not dramatically, not in a way you would have noticed if you had not spent thousands of hours in that specific basement, learning the specific weight of its cold. But I noticed. I stopped pushing the mop and stood still, and breathed it in. It was warmer by perhaps 4 degrees, maybe 5. I looked at the statue. The raised palm was lit differently than it had been. The overhead fixture had not moved. The light falling across the hand was the same angle, the same intensity, but the stone itself was returning light in a way it had not before. A faint warmth rising from inside the gray, the way a coal holds heat hours after the fire is out. Not glowing, not visibly lit. Just warmer, more present. I stood where I was for a long time. Then I walked toward it. I want to be careful about what I say next, because I have spent months now trying to find the language for it, and I am not certain I have found the right words. I was not frightened. That is the first thing, and it matters. I have asked myself since why I was not frightened, and the only honest answer I have found is this. Whatever was happening in that hall was not new. It had the feeling of something returning, not something arriving, like a sound you had forgotten you were listening for. I stopped 3 feet in front of the statue, close enough to see the glyphs along the hem of the robe. They were changing. Not rapidly, not with any drama, but the lines, which I had memorized, which I could have traced from memory in the air with my finger, were slowly, continuously rearranging. The thin carved marks, shifting the way the face of a deep river shifts, the surface looking nearly still, the whole thing unmistakably in motion. I watched them for a long time. Then the head moved. It turned toward me. The stone face, which had looked at nothing for as long as anyone had records, which had been aimed at the middle distance of that gallery for 7 decades, turned slowly, with the weight and inevitability of a tide, until it was looking directly at me. The palm lowered. The smooth eyes, which had no pupils, found my face and stayed there. And there was nothing mechanical about it, nothing automated. Whatever looked out of that stone was not performing recognition. It was recognizing. I did not step back. My cardigan was in my bag by the door, and I did not move to get it, even though I had gone cold again, not from the air, which was still warm, but from something inside my own chest that had no name yet. A grief I did not understand the source of, a grief that felt old. The mouth of the statue opened. Stone separating from stone, slowly, with the sound of deep water finding a new channel underground, not breaking, parting, the way ice parts in spring, reluctant, inevitable, long delayed. And then it spoke. The voice was not loud. It did not fill the hall. It came into the air at the same volume a person uses when they have been waiting to say something for a very long time, and no longer need to announce it. Low, clear, final. Queen of the long exile, come home. That was all. I stood there. The warmth from the stone reached me across those 3 feet of air. The glyphs along the robe's hem had stilled, arranged now in a configuration I did not yet know how to read but felt, in the back of my teeth and the base of my throat, like a name. Come home. I thought about the 19 years. I thought about the 3 teams of scholars and their unfinished reports. I thought about the assessment desk, where I had laid that folded summary, and the way no one had ever asked me what I had read. I thought about every morning I had come into this hall and started at the far wall and worked my way back, and how I had never, in all of that time, asked myself why I had never been able to stay away. Come home. I had no answer to give it, not yet. Whatever I was supposed to say to something that had waited long enough to witness the rise and fall of empires and chosen, out of all the people who had ever stood before it, to speak to the woman with the mop, I did not have that answer standing in me yet. But I would. I put my hand against the stone palm. It was warm. It had the warmth of something that had been patient for longer than patience is supposed to hold, and had held anyway, because it was waiting for a specific thing, and the specific thing had finally arrived. I am Marta Vale. I swept that hall for 19 years. Now I know why it kept drawing me back.